Hello guys, we are back in new fanfic, and if enjoying this then please share and like part 1. Now let's start the fanfic. So first and most importantly I want to congratulate Team 13 for their great performances in the Chunin exams in Suna 5 days ago, and of course well done to my son Naruto for winning the Chunin exams. Minato said as he sat behind his desk. In front of him stood Naruto, Itachi and Anko with the two boys covered in bandages. Naruto had his right hand covered up as well as his shoulder and had a few patches on his face. Itachi had the same on his left arm but had bandages wrapped around his chest and a few patches on his cheeks. Anko though was mostly okay and just had a set of bandages around her chest from breaking 2 ribs during her fight with Itachi. Since the end of the Chunin exams 5 days ago, most of the bruising and small cuts had vanished thanks to Tsunade and Shizune personally looking after Naruto and his team and pouring medical chakra through their systems. They stayed in Suna for 2 days to rest and recovered before all the Konoha visitors left and took 3 days to arrive back home in Konoha. His father though had talked with him a lot during those 3 days, and Naruto had a feeling it was because he was curious at Naruto's strength and how he managed to attain it. Once he got home he was expecting some kind of interrogation from his parents, since when they arrived back home his mother had a curious gaze on him as if trying to figure him out. His sibling though welcomed him back happily, and Mina had clung to him ever since. It had taken some blackmail with ice cream to get her off him, since he and his team were requested in Hokage's office. Around the room multiple members of the Konoha Shinobi Council stood watching and smiling at the 3 young shinobi and clapped lightly. On that side was also Makoto, who was smiling the biggest proud smile she could muster, with a feeling that she had done a good job with her team and that she had helped 3 great future shinobi. On the other side was Tsunade and Hiruzen, who were standing with Kakashi, Kushina, Shizune, and a few more of the Konoha Jonin. Then on the other side of Hiruzen were his former teammates and fellow Konoha elders Homura, Koharu and Danzo. The 2 elders he did not mind, though Naruto found them both to be a couple of sticks in the mud, always acting very serious. While the other guy Danzo gave Naruto an eerie feeling. Plus his Gigi, Tsunade and Shizune had warned it was best to stay away from him. Now I think everyone here would agree with me when I say these 3 have all proved themselves ready to become Chunin. Around the room everyone murmured in agreement. Then in that case I believe it's only fitting to have these handed out. Minato said as he pulled out a scroll from his desk and unsealed the contents of it. Out of the scroll he revealed 3 Chunin flak jackets and handed them out. First to Anko, then to Itachi, and then to Naruto, who he happily ruffled his hair. Naruto though did not react from it and just stood there as he listened to his father. Then today I would like to congratulate Anko Mitsurashi, Itachi Uchiha and Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze on becoming Chunin. He said as more murmuring and clapping rang out through the office. Many of the clan heads stepped forward to congratulate the 3 new promoted Chunin and shook their hands, telling them well done in the exams and how well they thought they all fought. Makoto eagerly came forward and wrapped all 3 in a big hug, telling them all how proud of them she was and how sad she was now that they were technically not a team anymore. Since her team became Chunin, Makoto decided to return back to being a full-time housewife, since now that her oldest was a Chunin and proved he was strong and had good friend with him, she wanted to turn her attention in now helping her middle and youngest child. Though she would still help the trio train when she could and maybe go on a mission from time to time, her duty now was to help Sasuke and Ria. Though when Makoto had passed Kushina and the others Konoha moms, she smirked at them. "I told you. 1 year and my team became Chunin," she said proudly as the other moms nodded that she was telling the truth and had lived up to the expectations that Makoto liked to brag about. Kushina thought, scowled, and internally promised that she had to somehow beat her eternal rival. "Chunin Uzumaki Namikaze now," Hiruzen said as he, Shizune and Tsunade came up to Naruto, with Shizune hugging and kissing him on the forehead, with Tsunade also doing the same thing. "You have come far since we began teaching that little 5-year-old who wanted to learn to be a ninja. It feels like only yesterday that I found you in the park trying to read that book on chakra," Shizune added. Naruto smiled as he hugged his older sister figure. I never did thank you for helping me with that. Shizune smiled and settled her head on top of his. And you never have to. Well, now that the exams are over, it means we can get back to training. Don't think because you're a chunin now that we have nothing left to teach you. Because we all have heaps loads to drill into that hard noggin of yours. Suan said as she tapped his head. Good, because I would have it no other way. He said as Suan grinned down at him. Around them the heads of Konoha began to pile out, with the elders of the village following after them as well as some of the shinobi. Kakashi and Shizune followed on out along with Itachi, Makoto and Anko behind them. Naruto and Suan was about to leave too, but their leave was cut short. Naruto, Suan, I was hoping the two of you could remain here for a moment. Minato said as he sat back in his seat with Kushina at his side. Kakashi nodded to Minato as he shunshined away while Jiraiya was out of the village. Naruto and Tsunade raised eyebrows simultaneously, which looked a little odd, but they hung around. Makoto, Itachi and Anko looked back in surprise, but after Naruto nodded to them they left. They did the same with Shizune and Hiruzen, who were surprised at the action. Naruto stood in front of his parents, who eyed him curiously while Tsunade stood a little to the side. Is there something wrong? Naruto asked his parents as they continued to gaze at him. No, there is nothing wrong. Kushina answered, taking a step forward and looking at her son. But we have some questions we need answering. Naruto, while you showed great promise in the Chunin exams, myself and your mother were surprised at just how far along you were in your studies, and we both noticed you use jutsus that were in the R library, with the Rasengan being the most noticeable. Can you please tell us why we had no knowledge of this? Minato asked. Naruto looked at his parents looking at him and raised an eyebrow while putting his hands in his pocket. He looked over at Tsunade, who just nodded at him. Because neither of you cared enough to help me, so I took matters into my own hands. He said, giving them both an answer neither were expecting to hear. What? Naru-chan, that's not true. Kushina said, defending herself and her husband, but Naruto just gave her a light glare. Really? Okay, then tell me, in the past, what have either of you actually helped me with? What did you train me in? He asked and watched their reactions closely. Both looked ready to speak but suddenly stopped and then had a thinking look appear on their faces. Kushina bit her lip as she thought, while Minato looked up at ceiling as if both were trying to avoid their son's glare. What did we teach him? Both thought. Minato then had a pleased look on his face. Well, we helped you with your fuinjutsu. I know we helped you with that. He said, but both parents were a little taken back when Tsunade scoffed from her spot. No, you didn't. Gigi helped me with my fuinjutsu. All you did was give me a book on level 1 fuinjutsu when I was 6. The rest Gigi taught me, or I taught myself. Kushina looked ready to say something but held it back and realized he was right. What level are you at in fuinjutsu? Minato asked rather delicately as Kushina leaned in. I'm just starting level 5. He said plainly as his parents looked surprised at the answer. Level 5. I only started level 5 when I was 13. Kushina thought, while Minato was in the same boat. Neither of you helped me with anything, nor did Kakashi and that pervert of a Sannin Jiraiya, he said, which surprised Minato and Kushina since he normally called Jiraiya Uncle Jiraiya, or when he was very little, Grandpa. They guessed he grew out of it. Shizune-chan helped me with my chakra control and taught me the uses of poisons and some medical ninjutsu. Tsunade-sensei taught taijutsu with Gai-sensei and conditioning my body, while Gigi taught me ninjutsu and fuinjutsu. Nowhere in the last 6 years did either of you actually help me. As for the jutsu, I took them from your library, yes, but I made my own copies of the scrolls and then put the originals back. And the Rasengan, Naruto, that was an A-ranked jutsu and a dangerous one at that, and one enemies would love to get a hold of. Well, I needed some kind of ace in the hole for the exams. I am grateful for learning the super strength from Tsunade-sensei, but I needed a last resort card. Something no one would see coming. Deception is part of being a shinobi after all. Kushina then spoke. Naruto, how long did it take you to master the Rasengan? She asked since she knew it took Minato around 3 years to create and Jiraiya and Kakashi spent months learning it. Naruto just looked at her. I got the basics down in a week then refined it during the month. He said, leaving both parents gobsmacked. Now both parents including Tsunade looked at him in shock. 1 week to learn the Rasengan was unheard of. In fact it bordered on the downright impossible. Minato, Jiraiya and Kakashi, 3 of Konoha's best shinobi, had been outshined by newly made Chunin. Naruto, if you wanted to learn the Rasengan so badly then I would have showed you how to. He said, but Naruto looked away. If I had asked you, all you would have done was brush me off as always and told me you were too busy or that you needed to help the twins. Minato looked down as he began to see that Naruto might have been right when Kushina looked at her son sadly with concerned eyes. We would have trained you if you had asked us, Naru-chan. I don't remember you asking for much help, she said, and both saw Naruto look at her in disbelief at the question. Ask you, he said, shouting at them as Tsunade shook her head. You are my parents. I shouldn't have to ask you. For the first 4 years that I training to be a shinobi, all I ever did was ask you to help me and train me. But every time you brushed me off for the twins. You pushed me aside like I didn't even matter, and Eiji and Mito got everything. I understand for the first year or two since they were babies and needed the added attention, but neither of you ever even tried. It was Mito this, Eiji that. And then Mina was born and then things got even worse. Now I don't hate my sibling, far from it, I love each of them very dearly. But do you know how hard it was seeing you spend so much time with them and having no time ever for me for almost 6 years straight? You were supposed to be my parents and you let me down because you favored your other children over your oldest when you should have treated them equally. After his rant was finished, he wiped away a stray tear that went down his face and turned around and left the office, leaving 2 very stunned parents behind. Tsunade, still with her back leaned against a wall, sighed. I hope you realize the damage you have caused to him, she said, finally speaking up and drawing the attention of the stunned blonde and redhead. Neither said anything at first, they just sat there playing over what Naruto had said to them as if trying to figure out what they just saw and heard actually happened. Minato struggled with his wording as he spoke. That, what Naruto said. I was not true, was it? I mean, did we favor the others more so than with Naruto? I just don't know what to make of this, he said, still struggling with what he just saw and heard. Kushina shook her head defiantly. It can't have been true. We would not favor our younger children over our eldest. I know it. It has to be some kind of mistake. Naruto, he is just confused and he is tired, that's all. He needs his rest. The exams were taxing on him. Tsunade narrowed her eyes and walked over to the pair and stood a little in front of Kushina. When she did, a loud slap echoed through the office and Kushina went stumbling back and dropped to the ground. Kushina held her cheek as a red mark began to show and it began to sting. Minato got up and went to his wife. When he did, Tsunade stood over the 2 of them, glaring down at them with her hazel eyes, making both feel rather small. You both really don't see the damage the 2 of you have been doing to him, do you? Just because you 2 idiots have not seen it does not mean no one else has seen it, she said, surprising both of them. I have seen you ignore Naruto for the good part of the last 3 years. The last few years were not as bad, but it still happened. I noticed it. Sarutobi-sensei noticed it. Shizune, Makoto, hell, even Makoto's kids and Naruto's friends saw it. I wouldn't be surprised if other shinobi or even civilians began to see it. If that's true, then why did no one say anything? Minato asked a little angrily, but backed down at the glare Tsunade was giving him. No one said anything because Naruto asked us not to. He got in his head that you would finally see what you were doing and that you would finally start paying attention to him, yet you never did. In fact, it got worse to the point that he even started feeling like he was a stranger in his own home. By now the down Kushina was doing her best to stay together, but it was evident in her eyes that she wanted to start crying. All he ever wanted was for the 2 of you to notice him, to teach him how to be a shinobi like all the other parents in the village and the other villages do. You two are supposed to be two of the village's best, you are supposed to be setting an example for the younger generations and you are supposed to look after this village. Tsunade's glare intensified and picked them both up by their collars and brought them close to her face. How are you supposed to do that when you can't even see when your oldest child is in pain? Whether you want to admit it or not, you two have failed Naruto. She then dropped them to the ground and walked out and slammed the door behind her. As she left, Kushina and Minato just sat on the ground with emotionless faces as Tsunade's words began to hit them as Minato's eyes widened in shock while Kushina put her hand to her mouth muffling the sound of her sobs. Home. Naruto didn't stop as he arrived into his home and went up the stairs, not listening to the sounds of his siblings welcome him home. He went to his room and slammed the door shut as he threw his Chunin flak jacket against the side of the wall. The nerve. How dare they think that I'm lying to them? They really can't see what they have done wrong, can they? He shouted in his mind as his anger got too much and he punched the side of the wall making a fist-sized hole in the wall. His breathing was a little ragged as he dropped down onto his bed as he just stared up at the ceiling allowing his eyes to get a little red at letting a few tears stroll down his cheeks. As he laid back he heard his door open and heard little footstep coming towards him. He already knew who it was by the footsteps. He looked over to see Mina standing there with a few crayons and a piece of paper, no doubt wanting Naruto to join her in some coloring. "Hi Mina-chan. You want to do some drawing?" he said sitting up, but Mina's looked at him with a tiny crease in her brow. She then shakily and with a bit of help from Naruto got on the bed and waddled to Naruto and put her hands forwards to his cheek and to his surprise began wiping away the tear marks. "Naru no cry," she said squeakily as Naruto gave her a little smile and put her in his lap making her giggle a little. "I wonder how much you understand Mina-chan," he thought as he put the piece of paper on his bed and took the blue crayon from Mina to her delight and together began drawing pictures on the paper together. When Minato and a still teary-eyed Kushina came home they had tried to speak with him but Naruto quickly left the house and made his way to Hiruzen's where he planned on spending his dinner and evening, not being able to look at his parents right now. A month later, Naruto strapped his sword to the side of his hip as he began making his way out of his room and to the training field where he would be meeting up with Itachi and Anko to get some morning sparring done. It was early morning so the only person who was up was Minato who had already embarked to his office while Kushina was still asleep as was his siblings since it was a Saturday. The month had been awkward to say the least. Minato and Kushina had tried to speak with him but Naruto just had nothing he wanted to say to them. Kushina had made more attempts than Minato since everyone knew that before the twins and Mito was born, Naruto and Kushina had a very close bond to one another and it was rare not to be seen together. To her, what she had done to her eldest child was unforgivable and she was going to make it up to him somehow. As he was about to open the door he heard light footsteps behind him and turned to see Mito standing there rubbing her eyes. "Oni-chan, where are you going?" she asked gazing up at him curiously. "I'm going to train with a few friends," he stated simple and Mito's face had a delighted look appear on it. "Let me go with you, please?" she asked looking at him with her big round blue eyes and gave him a puppy dog look. Naruto could feel himself breaking as she stared at him. "Please see?" she asked again make her lip quiver a little before Naruto sighed. "You have 5 minutes to get dressed," he said as she squealed a little before jumping up and giving him a sloppy kiss on the cheek before she ran upstairs. Naruto went into the kitchen and left a note behind telling Kushina when she woke up that Mito was with him and that she would be back by lunch. A few minutes later Mito came rushing down the stairs in her day clothes with her hair tied up in a little ponytail and the two set out. As they walked Mito grabbed a hold of Naruto's hand making him raise an eyebrow but he smiled as she hummed a little song and kicked her feet as they walked. After about 20 minutes of walking they arrived at their training ground to see Anko already sparring with Itachi. The purple-haired girl was annoyed that she missed out on her teammates' battle but had sworn that eventually she would train until she was up their level and could stand beside them. As they fought, Mito looked star-struck as she watched them, and her presence eventually went noticed when Anko and Itachi stopped their sparring. They both headed over with Anko smiling towards Mito. "You brought a little munchkin with you today, huh, Naruto?" she said as she patted Mito on the head, making the younger girl smile up at the older girl. "That was so cool. Can you teach me how to do that snake move thingy?" she asked, using her puppy dog eyes like she had done to Naruto earlier, but thankfully Anko was immune of such a move. "Maybe when you're older, munchkin," she said, making Mito pout. Itachi and Anko looked at him and he explained why she was with him today. Both patted him on the shoulder. "Ria-chan does the same with me," he said, understanding the situation while Anko rolled her eyes. For the next few hours the trio trained and sparred with one another while Mito sat safely away a good distance with wide eyes and a big happy smile as she watched them. The three older kids sparred one-on-one with the other, sitting with Mito and talked with her and answered any questions she had on some of their moves or techniques. For a lot of it was Naruto sparring with Itachi, and Anko would point little things out to Mito, who was paying close attention to the older girl. During their small breaks, when Mito asked if they could show her how to do one of their techniques, they thought about it and figured there was no harm in it. She had not unlocked her chakra yet, so they focused on her kunai throwing. Itachi and Naruto helped her with her aim while Anko helped with the speed she threw them at. Since they only had metal kunais on them, Naruto made sure the end was blunt and that he was always within a close distance to his little sister. "Oni-chan, can I see your sword please?" she asked as she eyed Naruto's blade in his right hand. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the request, but he thought there was no harm in it. He unsheathed his blade and Mito got a little closer as she looked it over with big excited eyes. She went to touch the tip, but Naruto quickly placed his hand over her. "No, Mito-chan. It's very sharp and you might cut yourself," he said as Mito nodded, but the message obviously did not go through quite enough when she had an excited look appear on her face and grabbed one of the kunais on the floor but picked it up at the sharp end. She gasped a little as she held her hand and gave a small wail and a cry. Naruto dropped his blade next to him and took Mito's hand as he gave her a reprimanding look. "Mito-chan, I told you, you need to be careful and not to pick any of them up without asking one of us first," he said, though he said it softly. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to," she wailed out as she sniffled. Anko came up behind her and gave her a hug from behind. Naruto sighed and gave her a small smile. "Here, let me heal it for you." He then took her hand into his own and gently uncovered her other hand, which was covering the cut. The cut was not very big or deep and was just a straight line staring at the bottom of her thumb and stopped at the start of the middle finger. Naruto's hand glowed green and went to heal it when his eyebrow furrowed in confusion. Itachi and Anko saw the look and looked at Mito's cut, and their faces then did the same. Mito's cut lightly glowered red as the cut slowly began to heal itself. As he looked at it, Naruto's Shozen Jutsu hand grazed over Mito's stomach as his focus was on the cut, and from the corner of his eyes he saw black markings appear on the bit of her stomach that was showing through her shirt. "Mito-chan, can you show me your tummy for a minute?" he asked. "You won't tickle me, will you?" she asked as they all laughed. "No, I won't tickle you," Naruto said, smiling at her as Mito gently lifted her top to show her stomach. When she did, Naruto and everyone else's suddenly had a serious and focused look on their faces as they saw a black spiral pattern with 8 points, 4 on top and 4 on the bottom. "Is that a seal?" Anko asked, looking confused at Naruto, who nodded. "Yeah, but it's very advanced, so advanced that it can only be my parents' work. I mean, the spiral is the symbol of the Uzumakis, so my parents must have put this on her." Why would they put a highly technical seal on a 5-year-old? Itachi asked as Naruto's chakra hand went forward. His fingers tips touched the seal on his sister's stomach, but when he did, everything went black and a pair of giant red eyes with black slits stared at him before he suddenly heard a loud roar. As quick as it came, it ended and Naruto fell on his butt and looked at the seal with wide and shocked eyes. "What is it?" Itachi asked as Anko looked curious as well, wondering what could have had their friend look so shocked and even look a little frightened. Naruto said before he shook his head. I can't tell them what I saw. At least not here with Mito in front of us. He thought as Mito looked at him curiously. I get it now. I know why they pushed me aside. And they did this to her. He thought angrily before mentally calming himself down. Naruto breathed in and got back on his feet before looking down at Mito. Is your hand better, Mito-chan? He said as he took her hands in his again and saw that it was completely healed. It's better, thank you. She said quietly before putting her hand in front of his mouth. Kiss it better. Naruto smiled at his little sister and planted a big kiss on her hand before he kissed her again on the cheek, making her laugh before he picked her in her arms. Come on, Mito-chan. It's about lunchtime and I kind of fancy some ramen. He said as Mito's eyes shined bright. Ramen, she called out whilst Anko and Itachi declined his offer and went back to their own homes, leaving the siblings to eat by themselves. They stayed at Ichiraku's for about almost an hour, leaving 10 bowls from Naruto and 3 bowls from Mito before they made their way back home. Mito's giggling was the first thing Kushina heard as Naruto and Mito walked through the door, and the 5-year-old went straight to her mother and wrapped her in a hug. Ka-chan, Naruto Oni-chan took me with him and his team to train and they were really, really good. They taught me how to improve my kunai skills, but then I got cut but Oni-chan healed me and then he took me to get ramen. She said. Kushina tried to follow the words that came out of her daughter's mouth. That's very nice, sweetie, she said as Naruto walked in not looking at her and said hello to his other siblings. Hey Eiji-chan, he said as he patted his brother's head. Hi Oni-chan, Eiji said as he ate his sandwich before he turned to Mina, who was pouting at him and was puffing out her cheeks. Naruto thought she looked adorable and went down to her level. Mina-chan, are you mad because I didn't take you with me this morning? He asked as Mina just continued to pout at him and her little cheeks went red. Next time I will take you with me, he said, staring at her before a couple of seconds passed and her pout turned into a big smile as Naruto leaned forward and kissed the tip of her nose, making her nose wrinkle in the process. Naruto, Kushina called as Naruto turned around and looked at her, not showing any emotion on his face. I was about to make some lunch. I know you have had ramen already, but maybe I could. No thanks. I'm still full from lunch. I'm going to my room, he said, and before Kushina could say anything he left the room, making her sigh sadly and look down at the floor before she took a seat. Naru-chan, how far have I pushed you away from me? She said quietly as she listened to Naruto's footsteps go up the stairs. A 13-year-old Naruto sprinted along the rooftops as he headed away from the Hokage building. He had just finished a week-long mission away with a 3-formation team who were sent to take care of 2 aligned bandit camps that had been causing some problems up north of Konoha. The mission was easy and the people he worked with were friendly enough with Naruto, not really caring much that he was just a kid like some others acted. A fair few times some of the other Chunin Naruto went on missions with would complain how they got stuck with a kid, the Hokage's son or not, and thought that Naruto would drag them down. Quickly though, Naruto proved them wrong and he quickly showed them why he had become a Chunin. He got no more complaints afterwards. Itachi was not around much since Itachi was usually on separate missions, confined to the Uchiha compound, since Fugaku wanted to make sure his prized Uchiha son did not sully himself with others too much or was getting ready to head into the Anbu forces. Anko as well he did not see as much as he would like, since she had taken a keen interest in the torture and interrogation division that was headed by the sadist Ibiki Morino. She quickly impressed the head of the division and was quickly making a name for herself. Though they did go on a few missions from time to time, it was not as many as he would have liked since they were his original teammates. Though one good thing that he was looking forward to was that the trio were beginning to decide to move out of their current homes and move in together. The 3 had done mission after mission to afford a nice 3-bedroom apartment where they could live together, since Anko wanted to have some company and not live on her own so much anymore. They were putting what money they could spare to one side, which would help pay for a nice, decent place for them. Most of their money went into their training equipment, new clothing, etc. While Naruto and Itachi wanted their space from their family since Fugaku and some of other clan members of the Uchiha clan were pushing Itachi down a path he did not want while Naruto felt suffocated by his parents. They figured they would look around for a year before settling with a place that the three of them made. Since the big confrontation after the Chunin exams 2 years ago, Minato and Kushina had done everything to try and make it up to Naruto, but the blonde boy was just not interested. They were doing it out of pity, and pity was the last thing he ever wanted from them. After seeing Naruto in the Chunin exams, they wanted to find out just how strong he was and how he got so strong in such a short time. Both were gobsmacked when they were told from people like Tsunade, Makoto and Hiruzen that Naruto was truly a prodigy and a genius of both natural talent and of hard work. Their son had been a once-in-a-lifetime genius and prodigy alongside Itachi Uchiha, and neither had even noticed. Since then, both wanted to help Naruto in his training, but it never went very well. Minato constantly asked him whether he wanted help with his fuinjutsu, and each time Naruto rebuffed him, saying he was fine on his own and that he could handle it. He never saw the sad and sorry look Minato would give his distant son. Kushina, however, was the worst. Since that day, she had tried to cling to him and bring her baby boy back to her, but Naruto stood away every time. She wanted to help him with kenjutsu multiple times, but like Minato, she got rebuffed. It had made her sad that her son did not want her help, but then again she realized that it was probably what she deserved. Naruto did not want to be cruel to his parents. He loves them like a child should love his parents, but he just felt let down by them. He had made it this far in becoming a great shinobi, and he would finish it without their help, or at least until he was ready to begin accepting it. Everyone has a goal, and his was to surpass his parents. Whether it be in fuinjutsu or kenjutsu, he would surpass them. Ka-san, Tu-san. Naruto thought as he jumped across the rooftops before he stopped and saw Yugao, Hana and Hayate down below walking in the streets. Smiling, he jumped down and landed next to Hana, who yelped in surprise before she swatted his arm. Naruto, I told you to stop doing that, she said, growling, while Naruto just laughed and petted her three ninkin who were barking for his attention. Hey guys, I missed you too, he said as they licked his hand before his attention went back to the trio. So where you guys headed? He asked as Yugao answered. To get some food down at the Akamaiki barbecue place. Kushina-sensei finished our training an hour ago, but we decided to do some light sparring for an hour. Naruto nodded. He was genuinely surprised that his mother had decided to take on a genin team, though he had a feeling it had something to do with her arch-rival and his team sensei Makoto Uchiha rubbing it in her face that her first genin team became Chunin in a single year, something that never been done before since the Sannin. The trio had been a team for about 6 months, and Kushina was hoping to get them ready for the Chunin exams in 6 months' time. Never would she allow Makoto Uchiha to get the better over her. How was the mission? Yugao asked. Kushina-sensei has been worried ever since you left. She kept looking in the direction of the gate every 5 minutes, trying to sense if you had arrived back yet. She knows I am a big boy and that I can take care of myself. Besides, I had teammates with me. True, but she still worries. I don't think she can help it since she is your mother, Hayate said before coughing into his hand while the other two nodded. Okay, well, I will see you guys later. I got some training to catch up on, he said as he said his goodbyes, jumped away, and headed towards the training grounds. He sprinted past each training ground, watching the shinobi as some of them as they trained and practiced their jutsu. Eventually he wound up at an isolated and far-off training ground that Anko had showed him and quickly fell in love with. Training Ground 44, currently known as the Forest of Death. Anko had showed it to him about a year ago, and he was amazed he had not found this place before. It was the most dangerous of all the training ground because of the giant animals and insects that live inside it, as well as all the natural hazards and nature's traps. It was the perfect environment for training, and he, Anko and Itachi went there as often as possible. Approaching the fences that lay around the training ground, he quickly jumped on top of the metal beams and pushed himself forward and onto one of the giant trees. He leapt along the tree and branches when he sensed a large object heading straight towards him with quick speed. Instead of panicking, Naruto just rolled his eyes before he halted and kicked his leg out with super strength packed behind it. When his leg went forward, it connected to a large spider 4 times the size of Naruto, sent it hurling 40 meters into the air, and sent it far away from him. I think I might have kicked it to the other side of the forest. He thought before shrugging, knowing it was the spider's own fault for attacking him in the first place. As he ran across the tops of the trees and headed towards his normal spot, he stopped and frowned suddenly when he sensed a small chakra signature nearby, and when he felt it and its emotions were on in distress and fear. That's odd, no one else should be out in this area. Only myself. Itachi and Anko train in here, and I know for a fact Anko and Itachi would not get themselves into trouble. Well, Anko maybe. Turning left and running towards it at his top speed, dodging the branches and sharp edges of trees that stuck out before he quickly landed beside a large plot of quicksand that was about 10 meters long in length and width. At first, he frowned because he could not see anyone nearby, but he still sensed a chakra signature nearby and wondered if he had just been sensing some kind of giant animal. Looking towards the center of the quicksand, a small indent on the surface of the quicksand made him realize whoever it was already drowning in the sand and would meet their death in a matter of moments. It felt scared and helpless, and Naruto had to help whatever it was. He made a few hand signs before slamming his 2 hands together. Wood style. Wooden pillar jutsu. He called out as wood shot out from the ground and made its way towards the center of the quicksand before it evened out and formed into a makeshift bridge. Naruto ran across the small wooden bridge and channeled chakra into his arms to give him more strength before he dived his hands into the quicksand and wrapped around whoever was sinking. With great strength, he fought against the quicksand and pulled whoever it was out. He stumbled back a little and landed on his butt. He took a deep breath since he had to use more strength than he thought he would against the quicksand, something many shinobi hated since there were very few ways to get out of it. Whoever it was in the quicksand was very small, so small in fact that if he squeezed them any tighter then they might have popped. He looked down to see the person he just saved. Though who he saved was not a person at all. Looked down, he saw it was a small cat, very small in fact that he could probably put her on top of his head. The little cat was completely white and had black stripes all over its body. Its paws were tiny, almost as tiny as a baby's hand. A pair of sharp teeth were protruding from its mouth. Hey there, little guy, what are you doing in a big scary place like this? He said as the little cat opened its eyes to reveal big green eyes looking back at him with a cat slit-like pupil looking back at him. It stared at him for a moment before it let out a small meow and licked his cheek affectionately, making him laugh a little. Ha ha, that tickles, little fella. He said as he patted its head. Thanks you, mister. I thought I was gonna die. The little cat said, making Naruto look at it in surprise. You talk? He asked as it bopped its head up and down. Of course I talk. Wells, that's pretty cool. I have never met a talking cat before. Talking toads and slugs yes, but never a little cat. He guessed he said something wrong because the little cat began hitting its tiny paws against him while it made a facial expression that he guessed was a pout. I'm not a cat, you big dummy. I'm a tiger, a white tiger from the White Tiger clan. And stop calling me fella, I'm a girl. The little tiger revealed, making Naruto look at her in surprise. Oh well, I am sorry about that. He said before he put his hand out to her. My name is Naruto. It's nice to meet you. He said as the little tiger cub looked at him with her big green eyes before she copied his motions and placed her paw on top his hand. My name's Kiera, part of the White Tiger clan. She said as Naruto nodded and stood. He walked away from the quicksand with Kiera still in his arms. He held her close so that she did not fall back into the quicksand, and he gently stroked her beautiful coat of fur, removing bits of sand from it as he did. You know, I don't think I have ever heard of a White Tiger clan before. Naruto said. I am aware of the toads, snakes, slugs, monkeys and dogs, but white tigers are a new one on me. Kiera moved her little head to look up at him. Ka-san doesn't like our kind going out in the world too much. She says long ago people ed the small tigers for sport and lots of us died. So Ka-san wants us to stay in our homeland since it's safe there and no one can hurt us. Naruto smiled. Your Ka-san sounds very smart and she sound like she cared a lot for her family. Kiera bobbed her head. She is very powerful. Ka-san is the chief of the White Tiger clan. A lot of the other tigers are a little scared of her since she is very strong. But I think Ka-san is a big softie. Yeah, I bet. Naruto thought. If you are not usually allowed to leave you home, then why are you in this forest? He asked. Kiera gave him a very toothy smile. Ka-san says I'm a very curious child and I always want to see what's outside of home. But Ka-san likes it when I'm close by since I am mama's only cub. So she's very protective over you. He said as Kiera nodded. Very, so she might be a little mad that I am out here, she said before she jumped out of Naruto's arms. You should meet her. I think she would like you since you saved me. I don't think that would be a good idea, he said waving his arms, but Kiera did not listen and placed her paw on the ground in front of them. As she did, black marking appeared on the ground, as Naruto recognized the summoning seals. A second later a large cloud of smoke appeared and it made Naruto go very nervous. He thought the cloud would be small, about a man's size of bigger, but instead it was enormous, covering parts of the forest, and went far over the tops of the trees. Oh crap, he thought, hoping that Kiera's mother would not turn him into cat food. As the cloud began to disappear, Naruto unconsciously took a step back, and for good reason. The creature in front of him was the very definition of enormous. She towered over the trees' tops, and if he had to guess, he would say that she was even bigger than his father's Sumongamabunta, at least a good head taller. Not quite as big as the Kyubi no Yoko he had seen when he was 5, but she was not far off. Her fur was like Kiera's, snow white with long black stripes over her body, but her coat had a shine to it that he guessed came with age. Her eyes were jade green as well, and her claws on her paws were even bigger than his Shisui. On the top of her head was what looked like some kind of tiara with an emerald in the center of it, and her tail and shoulder muscles had this grayish silver armor to it. The enormous white tiger looked round in confusion. Where am I? She called out in a strong but very elegant sounding voice. The voice had nobility laced all over it. Ka-san, down here. Kiera's squeaky voice called, and at first he wondered if the giant tiger would even be able to her. But she obviously did when her large head looked down and towards Kiera. Kiera, she said in a stern voice as her head lowered down to the ground to look at her daughter. What have I told you about leaving Mount Rainier? You know I don't like you leaving our home without me knowing her at all. Kiera stood up on her hind legs, which would have reached to Naruto's knee, against her mother's enormous nose. But Ka-san, it's so boring at home. And I met a new friend. See, she said, looking over at Naruto, whose eyes went a little wide as the enormous eyes of the white tiger chief moved towards him and narrowed. A deep growl came out of her throat that made the area vibrate, and Naruto could feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Did this person hurt you, my little cub? She asked as the mother tiger rose to its full height, making Naruto wonder if anyone else from the village could see the enormous tiger, since he doubted anyone could ever miss her. Naruto gulped and readied himself to defend himself if possible, but Kiera leapt in front of Naruto and looked at her mother with a pout on her face. Ka-san, please don't hurt him. He saved me. I might have died if he had not arrived. The great tiger obviously looked a little put back when her daughter spoke before her eyes narrowed again and went back down to look at Kiera's. Start explaining, daughter, she said, though it sounded more like a command. So Kiera began to explain what had happened, how she fell into quicksand as she chased a butterfly around and was drowning in it when Naruto arrived and took her out of the sand before it could completely engulf her. Naruto stood to the side as the mother tiger scolded her little cub at her foolish actions before her giant nose touched Kiera's body. I thought I might have lost you. she said softly as Kiara stood on her hind legs again and licked her mother's nose in comfort. Naruto smiled. She just a mother worried about her child. The giant tiger moved her head and looked towards Naruto before she stood at her full height again, making Naruto take a gulp. No words were spoke for a moment as the mighty white tiger chief boss looked down at Naruto with her large green eyes gazing right into him. After a moment of silence she spoke. Saving my daughter as you did have put you in a favorable light, and your actions have gained my thanks, young man. Few would dare to risk saving another from death, less likely counting we are of different species. For saving my daughter, you have my thanks. I am Shiba, chief of the White Tiger clan of Mount Rainier. Knowing to be polite in this situation, Naruto bowed to the giant white tiger leader. I am Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. It's nice to meet you, he said as Shiba nodded to him. You will have to forgive my earlier rudeness to you, young cub. My kind have had bad experiences with humanity, so we tend to avoid interaction with them. You are the first human I have spoken in many decades. He is real nice, Ka-san. He cleaned me and got rid of the sand. Kiara said as she showed her mother her clean fur. It was no problem at all, Shiba-sama. I was just glad that I could help and save your daughter when I did. If not, then I dread to think what might have happened. Shiba nodded her head and was about to speak when Kiara was waving her paws in the air, trying to get her attention. Ka-san, we should reward him. I know how we can reward him. It's my best idea I have ever had, she said as Naruto chuckled at the little cub while Shiba rolled her eyes but smiled a big toothy smile showing her large sharp teeth. What is your idea, young one? Kiara gave her a big smile and patted over to Naruto as she rubbed her head against his leg, purring before answering. Let him become our summoner and sign the White Tiger contract, she said as both Naruto and Shiba looked at her in surprise. Naruto did not have any words to say, though inwardly he was bursting with happiness. He had always wanted to have a summons after seeing Anko use her snake summons back in the Chunin exams, and it had stayed with him ever since. Shiba meanwhile narrowed her eyes to look at her daughter and Kiara. Kiara, might I remind you we have never had a summoner before. Why should we start now? Kiara frowned. But Ka-san, this could be a good way to get back into this world, plus Naruto would be a good summoner. Right? She asked as Naruto quickly nodded his head. Shiba stood tall as she looked down at Naruto with her piercing green eyes staring intently into him, almost as if she was staring into his very soul and trying to see if he was worthy enough to be their first summoner. What would you do if we gave you permission to sign our contract? Would you use this simply for our power? To gain respect and make people fear you? Shiba asked as if testing him. Naruto quickly shook his head. No, that would not be the reason, he said as Shiba and Kiara listened in. If I got the chance to sign your contract, then I would be eternally grateful. With your power I would use it to help protect my home, my village, my friends and my family. I would use your power to fight the evil and the darkness of this world and keep it at bay while keeping everything I hold dear safe and protected. That is what I would do if you allowed me to sign your contract. Shiba said nothing as she stared down at Naruto as she contemplated his words in her head. Beside Naruto, Kiara beamed up at him and was rubbing her body against his leg while purring happily, showing her like to the words that he had just spoken. After a moment Shiba looked down towards Kiara and gave her a small nod which made the little cub bounce in happiness before she placed her paw on the ground and another poof went out, though this time was only a tiny one. Out of the smoke was a large scroll, about the size of the one Jiraiya carried on his back for the toads. It was gray in color and on each end had a silver tiger heads while the kanjis for White Tiger was written on the side. Open it up, Shiba said to Naruto, who quick nodded and did so. He opened up the scroll to show long empty columns, once again proving that they really had never had any summoners before. Cool, he thought as he went down to his knees and looked the scroll over as Kiara sat beside him and Shiba looked over him. How do I do this? He asked looking up at the tiger boss. Bite your finger and write your name in one of the columns with your blood. Once your name has been applied to the scroll, the contract will be complete. Sounds easy enough, he thought before he took his right thumb and bit into the skin. He saw a tiny bit of blood flow out of the wounds and quickly began to write his name into the scroll. After a few moments he took his hand away and looks at the scroll that now had his name written in the first column. And that's it, Shiba said as the name glowed for a moment before it turned black, now permanently becoming part of the scroll. You are now officially the first summoner of the White Tiger summons. Don't disappoint us, she warned as Naruto quickly nodded though he had a big smile plastered on his face. As she quickly told him the hand signs for the summoning jutsu and Naruto familiarized himself with the set, Shiba looked to Kiera. Kiera, since this was your idea, you will be the boy's familiar. Kiera happily nodded before she jumped up and climbed on Naruto until she sat comfortably on his head while an amused Naruto looked up at her. Shiba coughed, getting their attention back to her. If that will be all, then I shall return home. I want you home before sunset, Kiera, she said as her little cub nodded at her mother before Shiba disappeared in a large puff of smoke, leaving behind a very happy Naruto and Kiera as the two began to get to know one another a little better. Namikaze household. Kushina swept the floor with her broom as she kept looking towards the front door of her house, wondering when her eldest was going to step through it. Since the big reveal of how they had been pushing their eldest away despite doing so unknowingly, Kushina had tried to bring her eldest back to them, but it was proving to be more of a challenge than both thought, and deep down Kushina's heart was cracking. It's nothing more than I deserve though. We did this and we can't expect to have forgive us so quickly. 5 years he had to suffer because of our stupidity, she thought. She rarely saw him at mealtime since he either had it with Anko, or around at the Senju compound with Tsunade, or at the Sarutobi manor. After she finished sweeping, Mina and Eiji came down the stairs with Eiji chasing Mina with a pillow while Mina squealed in mock horror. She knew Mito was at the Yamanaka's house at the moment, having a girly afternoon with Inora's daughter Ino. Kushina chuckled at her two children's antics and put the broom away before she went to one of the cabinets in the hallway. She began looking through it in order to give it a quick tidy up, but saw 4 photo albums at the back. 3 were quite clean and had obviously been used recently, but her gaze was fixed on the one at the bottom. She pulled it out and blew on it, removing some of the dust that was on the top of it. It was a little smaller than the other 3 but was very fancy looking, with a gray cover and gold leaf designs around it. On front she read what it said and was surprised at what she saw. Naruto's baby book. I forgot all about this, she thought to herself before she stood up, went into the living room and sat on the largest sofa as she brought her legs up onto the couch and placed the photo book on her lap. She opened up the first page and immediately felt her eyes water. The first picture was the ultrasound of when she was still pregnant with Naruto and was about 6 months into her first pregnancy. The photo was a little torn around the edges, but other than that it was fine. The photo beneath it was of Kushina at 8 months and had Minato cuddling into her stomach as if trying to cuddle their firstborn. We look so young in this picture, Kushina thought to herself. She and Minato had been quite young when they had Naruto. They were barely married and had both turned 23 when Naruto entered the world. But they didn't care. They fell in love with their little boy the moment they found out they were having him. The next picture was of Naruto when he was barely an hour old and was cuddled into Kushina's chest as had her arms delicately but securely carrying him as she kissed the top of his head. His little mop of blonde hair on his head looked like it tickled her nose from the smile she was giving in the picture. As she looked at the photo, she felt 2 small weights appear beside her and saw Mina and Eiji look at the book. What's this, Ka-chan? Eiji asked while Mina had her little finger trace over one of the photos. It's your big brother's baby book for when he was little. See, this is him here, she said, pointing to the picture she just looked at. Mina scrunched her nose. He looks like a knee, she said cutely, making Kushina laugh. He was only just born when this was taken, sweetheart, and you look like that when you were born as well, she said, though Mina shook her head as if saying no, she did not. She turned the pages and Kushina forgot all about the photos in the book, and it brought back so many memories. When Minato became Hokage when Naruto was 2, for 3 years it would just be Kushina and Naruto throughout the day, and they were days of fun, love and comfort. When he fell down, she picked him up and soothed him. When he got hurt, she healed him. When he had a bad dream during his naps, she would lie next to him. She saw a picture of her and Naruto in the park with Kushina pushing Naruto on the swing and had the biggest smile on his face. The one next to it was of Minato with Naruto on his shoulder, and then another of Naruto being read a bedtime story by Hiruzen. She could not help but see how much the people around them loved and cared for her eldest. Beside her, Mito and Eiji were drawn into seeing their big brother looking so little. To them, Naruto had always been their big strong older brother, so seeing him when he was their age and younger was odd. Her eyes then went down to a photo that she recognized as Naruto's 5th birthday, with her stand next to him very heavily pregnant and with her arms wrapped around his shoulders, while Minato stood beside her and Kakashi, Tsunade, Jiraiya, Hiruzen, Kurenai and Shizune around them. Smiling, she turned the page but frowned when she saw the page was completely empty. That's odd, she thought before she started skimming the pages, and got a bit more frantic the further she went through it. By the end of it, she realized the rest of it was empty. We never got back to it. She realized. When the twins were born, we just stopped putting photos in here, and Naruto 13 now. 7 years of memories and we don't have anything to document it with. It hit her that she did not have anything to commemorate Naruto's later years. Nothing when he was 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 or 12. There was nothing to document his entering the academy, graduation, first mission, first Chunin exam application. And what about his first? Who helped him with that? Where was I? Unknowingly, more tears went down her cheeks and left small dark splotches on the photo book. After a moment, a small hand was put on her hands as Eiji and Mina looked at her in confusion. Ka-chan, what's wrong? Eiji asked, looking up at his mother in worry while Mina hugged into her mother's side. Not wanting her son and daughter see her cry, she quickly wiped the tears away before she laughed it off. It's nothing, Ka-chan's just being a little silly, that's all. Before anyone could speak, the front door opened and closed. I'm home, Naruto said, walking towards the stairs. Kushina quickly put the book down, went to the hallway, and saw her son taking his sandals off. When he turned, he looked at her and just nodded at her before walking towards the stairs. Mina and Eiji came barreling towards him and hugged him round the waist while Mina nuzzled into him. Oni-chan, I missed you, Mina said as Naruto patted her head. Ni-san, do you think you can help me with my kunai throwing again? I still can't get the bullseye, Eiji asked, looking up at Naruto, who nodded down at him. Sure. Go out back and I will be there in a moment. Eiji smiled at him before he jogged out to the backyard. You want to come watch Mina-chan? He asked as Mina quickly nodded her head with a big smile and giggled when Naruto picked her up. Naruto walked towards the backyard, quickly slipping his sandals back on. He walked past Kushina and he saw the look on her face, and the way she looked at him, it made his heart ache a little. He thought back to what Yugao said about Kushina being worried about him and wanting him to be safe and sound. Then there was earlier where he saw Shiba act towards Kiera and how happy she was when she saw she was safe and unhurt. He stopped but did not turn around. The mission was fine, he said as Kushina perked up and looked towards him. There were no problems and I am unharmed. Everyone made it back and I should be home for a few days. He then walked away, and when he left her sight, a smile appeared on her face as she sniffed. I still have a chance to bring my baby back. I just have to be patient and let him come to me and to be there for him when he needs it. Kushina thought, since perhaps just giving Naruto his space would be what was needed to repair the bridge between Naruto and Kushina and Minato. Wiping her eyes, she started dinner as she watched 3 of her children from the kitchen window. Naruto steadily ate his cereal as he watched Mito and Eiji argue with one another while Mina was eating her toast and making a mess of it with peanut butter smeared all over her face and cheeks. Kushina was in the kitchen making her own breakfast while Minato had already left for work. It was Saturday and the twins were arguing over who would have the last piece of toast. Both had themselves in a headlock before Naruto picked up a spoon and gave them both a good whack on the top of their heads. "Oh Ni-chan." Both moaned as they nursed their heads and pouted at Naruto, who just looked at them with an amused look on his face. "If you didn't fight, then I would not have to knock some sense into you." "Yeah, no fighting," Mina said as Mito and Eiji glared at their little sister while Naruto rustled the top of Mito's hair, which had grown in length now that she was 5. Her hair went down and stopped just past her shoulders and was still a vibrant red, just like Kushina's. "Messy girl, aren't you, Mina-chan?" he said as Mina gave him a toothy smile while Kushina appeared beside Mina and wiped her youngest child's face, making Mina wriggle in her seat. While Mina was not looking, he leaned over and took a bite out of her toast. Mina caught him as he took the bite and pouted before she started tapping Naruto on the cheek with her little fingers, an unhappy look plastered on her face. "No, take my toast," she said as Naruto laughed. "Ka-chan, where is Tu-san?" Mito asked as she and Eiji split the last piece of toast. "He is at the office. He has a meeting with the elders again," she said, making Naruto frown a little as he ate his breakfast. His father and Hiruzen had dozens of meetings with the elders over the last few weeks, and it made him curious to what was going on. Never before had they had so many meetings and been so secretive about them since it started. The two elders Kaharu and Homura he knew a little of since they were his Gigi's teammates and friends, but the other elder he did not know much about. He was called Danzo, and when he saw him on the rare occasions, the man just had this uneasy, chilling feel to him. Like everything he looked at, he was analyzing and studying their worth. His mother and father had told him when he was little that he was to stay away from him. Naruto thought they were being silly, but when he started being taught by Tsunade, Shizune and Hiruzen, they all told him the same thing. Only then did Naruto begin to take that seriously and keep his distance from the man. Not only that, but he felt something odd was going on with Itachi and his family. He rarely saw Makoto as of late, and when he did, she had this jumpy look about her, almost like she was scared of something. When he tried asking Itachi, he would never answer and would divert the conversation somewhere else. Finishing his breakfast and shaking his head as he left the thought for another time, he got up, washed his plate and left the room just as Kushina had sat down to have her own breakfast. He didn't have time to think on that since today was a big day for him, Itachi and Anko. It was the day they were moving into their apartment. After working their butts off for the last year along with her and Itachi being moved up to special Jonin. They would have made Jonin given their spotless records and increasing strength, but the council had all agreed that, like the Konoha Academy where they moved up the age of admittance from 6 to 8, they did the same for becoming a Jonin and Anbu. Now the age was 14, which neither Itachi nor Naruto minded since it meant they only had to wait one more year. Anko was not quite ready though, but they knew within the year she would work her butt off and try and match them. As he walked to the stairs to begin to pack, Naruto stopped at a small cabinet and looked at framed photo that sat on top of it. The picture was of Mito and Eiji on their first day of the academy with their arms around each other's shoulders. They had joined little under a month ago, and so far they loved every minute of it. Their teacher was a new, young teacher called Aruka Yumino, a chunin with a pretty good record that Mito and Eiji seemed to like, though mentioned he had a habit of spending a lot of time on lectures. From what the twins had told him when they told him about their day, many of the other clans had their children entering the academy. Itachi and Hana's little brothers Sasuke and Kiba had all entered along with the heirs of the Yamanaka, Akamichi, Nara, Hyuga, and Aburame. Eiji spent most of his days with his friend Kiba in Izuka, while Mito was with her best friend Ino Yamanaka. The rest were all civilian children. It does not seem that long ago that Itachi, Anko, Hana, Yugao, Hayate and I had entered the academy, he thought before making his way back upstairs to begin packing. Despite planning to move out today, he had not told his family, just like Itachi had not told his. Mainly because they both knew that if they told them early on, they would attempt to do their best to sway them from leaving the nest. Though Naruto knew deep down what his biggest problem would be. Mina and Kushina. While Minato might respect his decision and give him his space, which is what he wanted and desired, he knew that Kushina would be against it and try to keep him at home. The very thought of one of her children leave the nest at 13 would no doubt hit her hard and try what she could to stop him and keep him in her grasp. Mina meanwhile was always with him when he was home. She stuck by his side whether it was sitting next to him at meal times, reading and drawing with him, or sneaking into his bed at night when she had a bad dream or just wanted to be nice and warm with her big brother. He was not looking forward to that, but it's what he wanted. He loved his family, but he wanted his own space with his friends, who were like a second family to him. As he shook his head, he pushed his door open and slowly began to decide what to do first. He pulled out a few scrolls from his desk drawer and laid them out on the bed, each one open fully so he could pack what he needed into certain scrolls. For half an hour Naruto worked in his room as he neatly folded his clothes on top of one scroll and sealed them away and put it to the side. The next was for all his books and jutsu scrolls that he had copied from his parents' library. He had only added a few over the last 3 years since Hiruzen was happy to give him a few ninjutsu techniques since he was known as the professor for his mastery of ninjutsu. As he began putting them away, he stopped on one book in particular. It was a book he found right at the back of his parents' library, and since neither obviously read it often since it had dust covering it, Naruto took it and never really gave it back. Mainly due to what was inside it, as he found a forgotten family member he never even knew he had. Flashback. So it's some kind of old bingo book. Naruto said as he looked the book over while Hiruzen was sat next to him pouring some tea into 2 small cups. He handed one to Naruto, who thanked him and took a small sip. It looks like it. I have not seen one of these for a long time, Hiruzen said as he looked at the book. This, I believe, was one of the first bingo books to have ever been distributed. Here I thought they were all gone. Naruto had to admit he was a little curious about this bingo book. If it really was the first one of the first kinds of bingo books to have been made, then it must have been around back when Hiruzen was in his youth and his parents were children. Opening it up, he began looking through the book and he was quickly enwrapped with the shinobi that were inside it. The Nadaime Mizukage, and a member of the Hazuka clan, S-ranked shinobi. The Nadaime Tsuchikage Mu of the Dust Style, S-ranked shinobi. Beside both names he saw the words deceased by their names. Ah yes, those two in particular were known for their rivalry. They ended up battling one another in a grand battle and ended upping one another. Onoki became the Tsuchikage just after Emu's death. Naruto nodded and turned the page and almost laughed when he saw Onoki, the Sandaime Tsuchikage, and what he looked like when he was younger. He must have been in his late 30s, Naruto guessed, when the picture was taken, and his nose was even bigger than it was now. Hiruzen saw the picture as well and let out a low chuckle, thinking the same thing. Beside his name Naruto saw the S-ranked symbol, but that it also mentioned that Onoki bordered on being SS class. Turning the page, Naruto almost let out a loud laugh when he saw a picture of Hiruzen, who looked in his mid-30s. His hair was not gray and there were now wrinkles on his face. It was so odd to Naruto to see his Jiji when he was younger. Next to Hiruzen's old photo was a SS class symbol that made Naruto almost choke on his tea. Jiji, you were a SS class shinobi? He asked as Hiruzen looked at the photo and laughed when he saw his old photo and beginning to wonder where the time went. He knew his Jiji was strong, but SS class was almost unheard of. Back in my youth I was, though I have slowed it down now that I am older. Though I can still give most a good beating if they push me enough. He said as Naruto knew that was true. He could easily fight on par with people like Tsunade and Jiraiya even now in his early 60s. As Hiruzen turned away to drink his tea, Naruto turned the page and stopped immediately at the person he saw next. His brow furrowed in confusion as he read the top name. Jiji, do you know who this person is? He asked. What is their name, Naruto-kun? He asked as took a sip of his tea. Beside him Naruto took a breath as he reread the name in his mind before he spoke it aloud. Genryusai Uzumaki. Turning to look at Hiruzen, Naruto noticed that Hiruzen had just frozen and his cup that was touching his lips was completely still. Naruto began to wonder if he said something wrong. After a moment of just sitting there in silence, Hiruzen gently took the book from Naruto and looked at the page. He saw Hiruzen looking at it intently before a very tiny smile appeared on his face. Genryusai Uzumaki. Now there is a name and face I had not seen or heard of in a long time. You know him, Gigi? Naruto asked as he saw Hiruzen nod his head. In a manner of speaking, I did. He is someone battled in the past as well as someone that I have the utmost respect for, he said, turning to look at Naruto and handed the book back and gave him an inquisitive look. As you can tell from the name, he was part of the Uzumaki clan as well as its clan head before it fell. This is the first time you have ever heard of that name, isn't it? He said as Naruto nodded. Should I know him? Naruto asked as Hiruzen nodded his head. Yes, though I am not surprised you do not know of him. Your mother rarely speaks about him to anyone, even to your father. My mom. So this guy was someone special to my mom then? He asked as again Hiruzen nodded. Yes, Naruto. Genryusai Uzumaki was the clan head of the Uzumaki clan back when your mother was a girl. But more importantly, he is your maternal grandfather, Naruto. Your mother's father. My grandfather. Naruto said in shock as he looked back down at the picture. The man had black hair on the sides of his head, and was bald on top. He had a tuft of hair sticking up at the back of his head in a topknot. He had thick black eyebrows and a long, thick black mustache. The most noticeable feature though was on his forehead was two long scars that interlaced with one another and formed an X-shaped scar. Naruto looked at Hiruzen in confusion. Why have I never heard of him before today? He asked as Hiruzen had a saddened look appear on his face before he began speaking. Your mother probably should be the one to tell you, but since she has kept it from you and your siblings, then perhaps it's okay for me to tell you about him now that you know about him. Your mother told you when you were younger that she came to Konoha when she was a young girl. Her father Genryusai was against her going to Konoha since he wanted her to stay in Whirlpool so she would be safe, secure, and so he could watch over her. But your mother has always been an adventurous one and she wanted to go to Konoha. In the last few months of her staying in Whirlpool, she and your grandfather argued a lot, and when Kushina left for Konoha, their relationship became very strained to the point where she told him that she hated the fact that she was his daughter and they stopped speaking altogether. Your grandfather was a very stern and strict man who led his life by certain principles, and it clashed a lot of times since your mother is very free-spirited. Naruto nodded and urged him to continue. Months later, the siege and destruction of Whirlpool occurred and your grandfather died protecting it. Your mother was heartbroken because she never had the chance to make peace with him. She only told very few people about him, and I guess thinking about it hurt a lot, so she just kept it quiet. I guess she thought it was better not to tell you and your siblings since she felt ashamed at what her last conversation with her father was. Naruto listened intently before he spent the next half an hour asking questions about his grandfather. Though he understood in a way why his mother never spoke about him, she wanted to know about his grandfather. End flashback. Looking at the old bingo book, Naruto quickly sealed it into one of the scrolls. Hiruzen had told him that his grandfather was one of the most formidable and powerful people that Hiruzen had ever met, to the point that when Hiruzen and Genryusai battled with one another, it would always end in a stalemate, something that shocked Naruto. His Gigi was a SS-class shinobi in his prime, and his maternal grandfather had matched him in power and skill. Genryusai was a master of the sword, which was what probably led Kushina down the path of being a great kenjutsu user and as a way of honoring her father. He was infamous because he would combine fire chakra with his blade and would cause enormous pillars and blasts of fire to erupt on the battlefield. Naruto had learnt that his grandfather blade was named Ryujin Jaka, and it put the fear of death into those that heard that name. Though as far as he knew, his grandfather remains along with his blade was lost in the rubble and ruins of Uzushiogakure. I wish I could have met him. To have been able to take 2,000 invading shinobi down with you, one of which was a strong Jinchuriki, was nothing short of incredible. With those thoughts over with and put the back of his mind for now, he placed the current storage seal away and he began packing away his shinobi tools like kunais, shuriken, ninja wire etc. Though when did he heard his door open to see Mito standing there. Ni-chan, can you? She started but then stopped when she saw how bare Naruto's room suddenly was with all his bookshelves empty and closet open with no clothes in it. What are you doing? She asked as she looked at Naruto with a confused look on her face, trying to figure it out. Naruto stopped for a moment before deciding it was best just to answer truthfully. I'm moving out, Mito-chan. I'm not going to live here anymore. As soon as he spoke the words, Mito looked at him a little confused before she made sense of what he just said, and Naruto watched as her face looked sad and heartbroken. Naruto turned away and kept sealing stuff away. She sniffed a little before she did what Naruto knew she was going to do. Ka-chan. Mito's shout echoed through the house, and as soon as she shouted, Naruto could hear footsteps racing up the stairs and Kushina's chakra signature getting closer to them, feeling panicked and confused. Kushina appeared in the doorway and went down to Mito's level. Sweetheart, what's wrong? Why are you shouting? She asked as Mito sniffled and pointed to Naruto. Kushina turned to look at Naruto but then noticed how bare the room was, just like Mito had noticed just moments ago. Her eyes went all over the room before they eventually looked at Naruto and her eyes looked confused. What's going on? Why is your room completely bare and why are you sealing stuff away into that storage scroll? She asked, though deep down an ugly feeling was building as if already knowing the answer. I'm moving out, Naruto said again, and from the corner of his eye saw Kushina go completely pale as her eyes look at him in shock. But you can't move out, she said in a slightly raised voice that had Mito take a step back from her mother. You are 13, you are not old enough to be moving out. Wrong, he said, not looking up from his storage scroll but tapped his Konoha headband. The moment I became a shinobi and put this headband on, I became an adult. Old enough to move out. Kushina looked at him and was struggling to find the words and voice them. Then where are you going to go? Do you already have a place in store? She said, trying to look imposing, though Naruto took no notice of it. I have a 3-bedroom apartment with Itachi and Anko. We have been saving and putting bits of our mission money to the side for the last 2 years and we finally have enough. We already made the deposit. Anko is probably already there while Itachi will be doing the same thing as I am right now. Looking down on his bed and seeing everything he wanted to take was packed, he closed the final scroll and put the scroll away in a backpack that he slung over his shoulder. Walking over, he went down on one knee and kissed Mito on the head. You can come and see me whenever you want, okay? He said as Mito nodded, though was still a little teary-eyed. She gave him a hug around his neck and stayed that way for a few moments before they let go. He stood up and looked towards Kushina, who was struggling to come up with what to say. I will come by and visit when I can, he said before giving his mother a quick kiss on the cheek, making her gasp a little before he made his way downstairs. As he got downstairs, he quickly explained what he was doing to Mina and Eiji, who were standing at the bottom of the stairs wondering what all the commotion upstairs was about. As her mind began working, tears welled up in her eyes and pushed of her spot and ran down the stairs at great speed. As Naruto said goodbye to a teary-eyed Eiji and Mina, Naruto felt 2 arms wrap around his shoulder and hold him in a tight grip. You are not going anywhere. This is your home. This is where you belong, Kushina said in an uneven but firm voice. While she held onto her son, she pushed a small flow of chakra in her wedding ring where a small Hirishin seal was located. Naruto took a deep breath and tried to fight out of her grip, but her grip just got tighter and tighter. Seeing no other way to get out of it, he used the Kawarime with Eiji, who suddenly appeared in Kushina's grasp. Naruto quickly went towards the door and was about to open it but stopped, mentally cursed when he heard his father's voice. Kushina, what's wrong? Why did you call me here? Minato asked as he appeared moments before beside his wife and saw her teary and pained look. Kushina sniffled and looked towards Naruto. Naruto's moving out. I'm trying to stop him, but I need you to help convince him. Help me get him to stay, Minato. She cried as Mina, Eiji and Mito all stood to the side just watching their parents and older brother. Minato looked surprised and looked over to Naruto, who had his back to him and had his hand on the door handle. Naruto, Minato said softly as he took a step forward. It does not have to be like this. We can figure something out. If it's space you want, then we can find a way around it. We don't want you to leave our home. Not yet, at least. Your mother and I, we are sorry. Sorry for the loneliness we put on you for 5 years, but as you can see, we are not quite ready to let you go yet. Please, Naru-chan, Kushina said, calling him by his old nickname, please stay with us. Stay with me. She whispered the last part, but Minato and Naruto both heard her. Naruto stood there a minute not saying anything before he slowly turned his head just enough that they could see his left eye. I'm not the little boy that needs to coddled anymore, and I have been taught how to look after myself since the day after the fox attack. Neither of you helped, so I learned on my own or from those that were willing to help me. Now I want to branch out on my own and become my own person with my own life away from home, he said before his eye narrowed. You owe me that much, he said as both Minato and Kushina flinched. Neither Minato nor Kushina answered at first as they played it over their minds. While Kushina was still set on him staying with them, Minato's mind, however, was thinking something different now. If his eldest child and first son wanted to leave the nest, then maybe they should let him. He needed his own space and needed time away from his family, though mainly Minato and Kushina. Just maybe giving Naruto his own space could help build that lost bridge between them and their son. Minato sighed before he took a step back. If you want to go, then I won't stop you. But know you are always welcome to come home. You will always have a home in this house, he said as Kushina looked at him in shock while Naruto looked at him before giving a small nod and a very tiny smile as if saying, thank you, to him. No, this is his home. I don't want him leaving us just yet, Kushina said, but before she could get close to Naruto, Minato's arms wrapped around his wife, halting her. Let him go, Kushina. He's ready, Minato said, but felt his heart break when he heard his wife's sobs. Minato watched as Naruto finally pushed the handle down and walked out of the door before gently closing it behind him. Letting out a small cry, Kushina wriggled out of Minato's grasp and ran upstairs and into their bedroom, closing the door behind her as she cried and sobbed as her eldest left the home at only 13. As Mito and Eiji went back into the kitchen and wiped their noses, Minato walked upstairs to comfort his wife before he had to leave to go back to his meeting. As he did, he never noticed his youngest child bolt towards the door and slip out. With Naruto taking a steady breath as he set foot out of the door, Naruto began to walk forwards away from the house he grew up in when he heard the door creak open. He sighed, thinking Kushina had gone after him, but instead felt two smaller arms wrap around his waist. Looking down, he saw Mina holding him tightly with tears trailing down her face. Don't go. I don't want you to go away, she hiccuped out. Naruto felt his heart break when he saw the state she was now in and could not help but feel guilty. Getting down to her level, he hugged her close and felt her put her face into the crook of his neck. Mina-chan, it's time for me to head out on my own, however I will still be around. I will still see you every day if you want, and we will still have dinners together. But I have a life away from home now, he said, but Mina didn't look any better as she clung to him desperately. Hey Mina-chan, he asked as he tilted her head up to look at him. How about I take you with me to where I will be living with Itachi and Anko? That way you know where I am and how to get to me. Would you like that? Mina hiccuped and Naruto wiped away the tear marks from her face as she gently nodded. Okay, come on then, sweetie, he said as Mina jumped onto his back as he piggybacked her before he started walking again. Mina snuggled into his back and rested her head on his shoulder. As they walked together, the villagers of Konoha noticed the two together and all smiled, and the women awed at the brother and sister duo. They could see from Mina's face that she had been crying and guessed Naruto must have been cheering her up. As Naruto talked softly to his little sister, who was happy being snugly with her brother, Naruto saw across from them was Itachi, who had little Ria perched on his back just like Mina was. Naruto appeared next to Itachi and nodded to the Uchiha. "You too, huh?" he asked as he nodded. "How did they take it?" "My mother was what I expected. She was shocked, but she understood the need for space, though she did cry and hug me for 5 minutes asking where her baby went. My father was not happy and told me I was forbidden from leaving. As you can see, I did not listen and left. Sasuke was upset, but I told him I would still see him most days, though Ria clung to me. Yeah, same here. The twins took it well, as did my two-san, though Ka-san was not happy and wanted me to stay home. Mina clung to me as soon as I stepped outside." Itachi nodded, and both walked quietly with one another while their sister chatted to one another on their backs. After 5 minutes they eventually made it to their new home. It was a decent-looking apartment building with 7 floors to it. It was a creamy-colored building with a light red wooden roof on the top. It looked relatively new and was one of the better looked-after apartment building in the Konoha, since some tended to be a little worn. It was only 15 minutes away from his old home. Both boys entered and walked up all the flights of stairs until they entered up on the top level. They walked down the corridors and with their news key opened up the last door on the end of the hallway. As soon as they entered, they saw Anko sitting on a couch they had bought together eating a late breakfast. She looked over and grinned when she saw them. "Yo, it's about time you got here. And you brought the little munchkins too," she said happily as she grabbed and spun Mina and Ria around, making the two girls laugh, forgetting their earlier sadness as the purple-haired older girl cheered them up. "Can we keep them?" she asked and pouted when Itachi and Naruto shook their heads. "As nice as that would be, I don't think our parents could handle another child leaving the home." Anko winced. "That bad, huh?" "Pretty much," they both said before they went to put their things away in their new rooms. Naruto walked towards the room that was opposite Anko's and walked into a room that was nearly twice the size as his old room and had a double bed stationed in the middle of the room. The bed had dark gray covers and pillows, and the wall of the room was painted dark blue. A window was stationed on the right side of the bed, and two, along with a bedside table on the right and a decent-sized wardrobe to the left. Naruto smiled at his new home and began to pack his stuff away. Midway to putting his clothes into the wardrobe, he saw Mina walk in and look around his new room. "Do you like it?" he asked as he saw her looked at the room with narrowed eyes, as if debating whether or not it was a good room and, more important, if she could sneak into it. She said before she ran over towards his bed and jumped onto it and rolled around on the covers. Naruto raised an eyebrow at her as she messed up his bed covers. He smiled and jumped onto the bed as well as making Mina go up in the air a little as Naruto caught her in his lap and tickled her tummy. For a minute he ticked his little sister until she begged for mercy as tears of laughter went down her face. Once he stopped, he saw her pout before it broke into a smile. "I love you, Mina-chan," he said as he kissed the top of her head. In response, he got a big smile and a sloppy kiss on the cheek. "Love you to Ni-san," Mina said as brother and sister just sat there for a few minutes as they enjoyed each other's company and Naruto playing with Mina's longer hair, which made the little girl giggle. After a few minutes, Itachi appeared in the doorway with Ria holding his hand. "We need to go pick up the coffee tables and the wardrobe for Anko. She did us into getting it for her," he said as Naruto nodded. "Mina-chan, Itachi and I just need to go make a few errands. Stay in the apartment and play with Ria-chan. We won't be very long," he said as the little redhead nodded and ran out of the room and into the living room with Ria. Cracking his shoulders, Naruto stood up and with Itachi left the apartment together after seeing Ria and Mina playing with Anko. "Do you think we should be worried leaving her alone with those two?" asked Naruto, remembering their friend's new hobbies. "I'd rather have them take after her than those fangirls," said Itachi, shuddering slightly as they walked out of the apartment building, making their way to the furniture store they had ordered from, which was on the other side of the village. Much to their annoyance, so they jumped on top of the buildings and ran over. Though after a minute of running, Naruto suddenly stopped and his head snapped to the right of him. In front of him Itachi had stopped and jumped next to him, looking at him curiously. What is it? He asked as Naruto narrowed his eyes and gained a look that Itachi recognized as when he got ready for a fight. There is a battle going on just right of us about a mile away, and it seemed to be a group against one person, and that person is not faring well from their emotions and chakra. I recognize the signature, he said before turning to look at Itachi. It's Shisui. Naruto and Itachi ran along the rooftops as quick as they could as they darted towards the area where Naruto had sensed Shisui. Itachi already had his Sharingan fully activated and had a focused and intense look on his face. How much further? He asked back to Naruto, who was running slightly behind him. Naruto sensed Shisui's location with his sensor abilities before answering. Just over that ridge. He's tiring and I think he's hurt, Naruto said as they both picked up the pace. After a few moments, they both jumped over the ridge and landed at one of the empty training grounds. Naruto sensed there was no one around the training ground, which made him understand why there was no one around to help and see what was happening. In front of them, they both saw Shisui, who was down on both of his knees looking exhausted and had 2 holes in his chest. He was breathing unevenly and blood dripped from his mouth. Around him were 8 Anbus, though looking at their masks Naruto and Itachi could tell something was off about them. Though they were wearing normal masks like the regular Anbu wore along with a darker version of the uniform, on their masks they had Ne symbol in black. Neither Naruto nor Itachi recognized the symbol since neither had seen these kind of Anbu before. Scattered all around the field were dead Ne Anbu, roughly around 21 if by Naruto's count, showing Shisui had not gone down without a fight. They saw one of the Anbu go in for the blow on Shisui, but before the Tanto strike could land, Itachi shunshined in front of the strike and blocked it. He then grabbed the Anbu's wrist, twisted it and threw the Ne Anbu into a nearby tree. Itachi. Shisui coughed out as he spat blood onto the ground while Itachi got in front of him. Stay behind me, he said as Shisui nodded and slumped to the ground. State your business. Why are you attacking my clan member? Itachi asked but got no response as the masked figures just looked at him in silence. After a few moments of silence, the Anbu shot forward and went to strike Itachi. Before Itachi could defend himself, though, a giant wooden wall erupted in front of him and blocked the strikes as the 2 Uchiha looked in surprise. They looked up to see Naruto standing on top of the wooden wall with his blade drawn out of its sheath. He looked down at them. I was going to tell you eventually, he said as Itachi had questions bubble up in his head but would save them for later. This one possesses Mokuden, one of the Anbu said in an emotionless tone. Take him alive. Leader Sama will want him. The other Anbu nodded before the 7 of them went forward. 4 went towards Naruto while 3 went towards Itachi, whose Sharingan was now spinning. As they Anbu went to fight him, he followed their movements and countered them as he ducked a swing from a Tanto and drew a kunai from his pouch. As he ducked another swing, he drove one kunai into the back of the head of one of the Anbu, watching as they dropped to the ground lifeless. With one down, he turned to the other 2 who stood beside each other. Both went through some hand signs before saying, Futon, Datapa. The blast hit Itachi, but instead of falling to the ground or getting knocked away, he erupted into a murder of crows. The 2 Anbu looked around before a pair of hands grabbed one Anbu and dragged him into the ground, where after a few seconds a severed head got thrown out of the earth and rolled along the grass. The last Anbu threw kunai and shurikens down the hole in trying to Itachi with a mass barrage of weapons, though after a few moments he saw down the hole was a tree stump. He heard footsteps behind him, but as soon as he looked around he only saw a pair of Sharingan looking at him. He found himself trapped on a tree as Itachi melded out of the tree with a kunai in hand and slashed at his throat. The Anbu dropped to the ground lifelessly, making a soft thud sound. Itachi looked over to Naruto and saw he was handling his Anbu without problems and went over to Shisui, who breathing was hard and labored. Naruto blocked a strike from one of the Anbus with his blade before slamming his fist into one of the Anbus' faces, cracking their mask and making a sickening crack be heard in the area as the Anbu dropped to the ground dead. Naruto ducked a swing and kicked another Anbu in the stomach, which put him to the ground before he blocked another strike with his blade and pushed forward. Naruto jumped in the air and kicked off from one of the Anbu's shoulders and did hand signs. Sweden. Tepudama. He called out as water bullets shot forwards towards the Anbu, who all quickly evaded the attacks. When they did, though, a shadow clone of Naruto appeared next to one of them and drove a kunai through his chest, while the real Naruto used the distraction to deliver a hard super-powered axe kick to the back of one of the Anbus, crushing him into the ground and breaking his spine in the process. With the last Anbu, who defiantly stood their ground, he went to throw shurikens at Naruto, but before his hand could even reach into the pouch, Naruto's blade appeared in his chest. Small bits of blood leaked out from under the white mask before he too dropped to the ground. Taking a deep breath and wiping a bit of sweat from his brow, he noticed from the side that the Anbu that was knocked into the tree was beginning to get up and trying to make a getaway. Mokuten. Jubaku no Jutsu. Naruto said as wooden branches wrapped around the Anbu. Though before the Anbu's arms were completely locked, the Anbu dug their hand into their pouch and put a small pill into their mouth. Naruto appeared in front of the Anbu, but before he could even speak, he saw white foam coming out from underneath the mask, making his eyes widen before growling out. He tore the mask out and saw foam coming from the mouth, indicating he had taken a cyanide pill. Damn it, Naruto said before he let the body go, when a green seal glowed on the Anbu's neck and the body was suddenly set on fire as any remains of the Anbu was destroyed. All around similar actions were being done around on the other Anbu as they all were set alight. Whomever they belonged to knows some knowledge of seals. Naruto thought before he made his way over to Itachi and Shisui. When Naruto crouched on the other side of Shisui, he saw the two holes in Shisui's chest and knew immediately there was no way he was going to survive. He looked up at Itachi, who looked at him for a moment before Naruto gently shook his head. Itachi's face fell as he looked back at Shisui, who was getting very pale and was coughing up more blood. Itachi. Naruto, listen to me, he gasped out as he motioned for them to lean closer. These Anbu were not regular Anbu. They were part of Danzo's root shinobi. They have been brainwashed into becoming emotionless tools at his disposal. Danzo has this belief that every part of the village needs to be militarized and believes he is the one that will bring Konoha to greatness. All he wants is more power and for Konoha to be under his thumb. He then looked at Itachi. I tried to go to the clan and use a special genjutsu on the clan members that are revolting, but his root Anbu got to me first and tried to take my Sharingan. Why go after your Sharingan? Itachi asked as Naruto was shocked at the part about Uchihas revolting against the village. Shisui took a long and ragged breath before both watched in amazement as his Sharingan morphed and formed into a four-sided shuriken. Mangekyo Sharingan, Itachi said in awe, as did Naruto, since no one had ever activated it to his knowledge since Madara and Izuna Uchiha. I awoke my Mangekyo Sharingan when I was 12. Since then I have developed a powerful genjutsu called Koto Amatsukami. The technique itself allows the user to enter the opponent's mind and manipulate them by giving them false experiences, making it seem as if they were doing things of their own free will. Wow, Naruto said. That might be the most powerful genjutsu technique that I have ever heard. Yes, and Danzo wants my Sharingan. If he gets it, he would no doubt use it for his own goals. He must never be allowed to get my Sharingan, or any Sharingan for that matter. He said before turning to look at Naruto. How good are you in medical ninjutsu? I know you were taught by Tsunade Senju, who no doubt taught you some of her techniques and medical knowledge. He asked as Naruto pondered it for a moment. I'm okay, I guess. Not enough to be classed as a medic nin, but I know enough when the situation calls for it. He said as Shisui nodded before coughing violently again. Good. In that case I need you to do something for me. He said, coughing violently again before continuing. Take my Sharingan eyes out of my body and store them away. The sooner you do it the better. Naruto and Itachi looked shocked by the order, but both looked at one another before they both nodded, since Shisui obviously knew Danzo might try to get to his corpse to obtain the Sharingan. Okay, but I don't have the equipment with me now, but later when you have, Passed on, I can collect the eyes and store them for you. Shisui nodded before smiling. Good. That is good. After you take them, keep them hidden until Itachi will be in need of them. Why would I be in need of them? Itachi asked, not fully understanding, but Shisui just gave him a sad smile. You will understand soon enough, he said before giving one last serious look to Itachi. Do not allow our family to delve into the darkness any further than they already have. If it means you have to take actions against those that would harm our innocent family members, then it should be by our hands to stop them. It's our duty as Uchiha and as shinobi of the leaf to stop those from hurting its people, even if they are part of our village and of our blood. Itachi nodded as silent tears went down his face, with Naruto not faring any better as they listened to Shisui's last words. Lead us, Itachi. Lead our family into the light and rid them of the darkness once and for all. Shisui muttered before his eyes dropped and his breathing slowly came to a halt. Naruto dropped his head down in respect of the fallen shinobi while Itachi gently closed Shisui's eyes with his palm as he said silent words and bidding his clansman and cousin luck in the next life. As he let a few more silent tears stream down his face, Itachi suddenly scrunched his face up and held his eyes as they began to feel like they were burning. Naruto was alarmed and was about to ask what was wrong before he saw Itachi look at him with his Sharingan activated and watched as the three tomos slowly began to move inwards and formed a three-sided pinwheel. Itachi, your eyes, Naruto said as Itachi took his headband off and looked at his reflection in the metal to see his eyes' new form. Mangekyo Sharingan. The Mangekyo Sharingan is awakened through the trauma experienced from the death of a person very close to the Sharingan user, with the user normally having to witness or experience this firsthand. So that's what Shisui meant. He said quietly. Do not tell anyone about my new eyes, he said towards Naruto, who nodded. As long as you tell no one about my Mokuden, he answered back as Itachi gave a nod back in return. They sat there for a few moments and saw that the burning bodies had now almost been completely destroyed and that there was almost nothing left of them. Collecting Shisui's body and sealing it inside a storage scroll, they both left the field and went back home since they had eyes they needed to remove and needed to talk with the Hokage. Later on, Naruto and Itachi did not have to go to the Hokage's office to see Minato since Naruto sensed Minato along with Kushina and the twins were at his new apartment, obviously wanting to see where he was now living and give their opinion of the new place. He could also sense Hiruzen was there as well, which was a bonus since they would need to speak with him too. As they walked into the apartment, they saw Naruto's siblings along with Ria sitting on their couch talking and playing while Minato, Kushina and Hiruzen was chatting to Anko. Kushina was looking around the apartment trying to find faults in it, but to her disappointment the apartment was actually very nice in her opinion and thought at least her son would live somewhere decent. Hello Naruto. I hope you don't mind, but your mother and I wanted to see where you now live so we knew where to reach you, Minato said as he spoke a little nervously and scratched the back of his head. Though they were surprised when they saw red marks around their eyes indicating that Naruto and Itachi had been crying and were looking at them seriously. Anko, Itachi said, getting her attention. Could you please take Ria, Mina, Mito and Eiji into your bedroom for a bit? We have matters to discuss with the Hokage. Anko looked at them in confusion, but she shrugged and led the four children into her room. The three adults look at Naruto and Itachi in confusion, wondering what they wanted to talk about. When they heard the door click, Itachi spoke. Shisui Uchiha is dead, he said, getting surprised and wide-eyed looks from the three. That was not what they expected to hear. How? Minato asked in his Hokage voice, wanting to know why one of his shinobi was dead. We found Shisui after Naruto detected him with his sensory abilities. He was in some kind of battle, so we went as quickly as we could. When we arrived, we found he was fighting with a group of Anbu. Only we saw on their masks were Nei symbols. The two boys watched as Minato and Hiruzen's eyes hardened. Danzo. Hiruzen gritted out. We took out the Anbu, though Shisui had already 24 of them on his own, but his wounds from the battle were too much. He died a few moments later. As they recounted what happened, both Naruto and Itachi decided that they would keep the fact that Danzo was after his Sharingan since it could lead to the discovery of Shisui's Mangekyo Sharingan as well as Itachi's. Shisui told me that he was going to try and use a genjutsu he created on members of the Uchiha clan. He does not want them to rebel, so he thought it could change their thoughts about it, but Danzo got to him first. Minato, Kushina and Hiruzen looked anxious, but Naruto spoke up. I already know. Itachi told me and I heard Shisui mention it. It explains why Makoto-sensei has been so jumpy lately. I have new information on that front as well. Itachi spoke as Minato and Hiruzen stood ready to listen, with Kushina listening in as well. He had already told Naruto about it during their way back to the apartment, and it made Naruto boil in anger. The adults saw his reaction and wondered what it could be. Itachi nodded to Naruto, who put up a hand sign. Fuin, he said as the adults all saw silence seals around the apartment glow to life. Both Minato and Kushina inwardly smiled and jumped for joy at their son's Fuinjutsu knowledge and usage. My father, along with the Uchiha members that are going through with the coup d'etat, had a meeting last night. They are going to attempt the coup within the next few days since they are tired of waiting. He said as Minato nodded, knowing arrangement had to be made now. However, during the meeting the subject of your daughter Mito sprung up. He said as the adults' eyes all widened. The Uchiha clan knows Mito as the Jinchuriki of the nine-tailed fox, and they plan on breaking the seal. Naruto answered as they all snapped their heads to look at him. Minato and Kushina looked at Naruto in a loss for words. Naruto. Kushina whispered. How do you know what your sister contains? Naruto sighed. I found out when I was 10. I saw the seal by accident, and then when I went to look at the seal I must have accidentally entered some kind of mindscape, because the next thing I know I saw a pair of large red eyes looking at me and threw me out with a roar. Plus I could never forget its chakra after that night. Minato and Kushina looked at him sadly, and as much as they wanted to talk to him about it, right now it had to wait. How does your family know about Mito's status? It was kept very tight-lipped about it. Only myself and a selected group are aware of it. Minato asked as he narrowed his eyes at Itachi. I am unsure, though I do have a suspicion. He said as Minato motioned for him to continue. When I listened into what they were saying, I heard a voice that I did not recognize. When I managed to get a look inside of the room, there was a man in a black cloak speaking with my father. There was never a name that was given, and I never saw his face, but when he turned around I saw what was in the hood. His face was covered by a mask with a black flame-like pattern and a single hole for his right eye. Afterwards he used some kind of jutsu to teleport away. After that they just spoke about how they would attack and who they would allow to live when they ruled. Naruto nodded and turned to look at the adult, but he almost took a step back at what he saw. His father's fists were gripped so tightly that his nails made his palms bleed, and his eyes had steeled over even more than before. His body even shook a little as he gritted his teeth. Though his father looked imposing, it was his mother's look that scared him. Never in all his years of life had he ever seen his mother have a look of absolute hatred on her face. Her violet eyes were so dark that they looked ready to. So he came back. Hiruzen said as Kushina and Minato tried to rein in their anger. Who came back? Who is this guy? Naruto asked, since he must have done something terrible to have earned his parents' hatred to such a degree. He watched as his parents turned to one another and spoke in hushed voices that Naruto could not make out. After a few moments, they turned to look at him. Naruto, we know you must have question about who this person is, but now is not the time to tell you. Once the problem with the Uchihas has been solved, then we will tell you what you need to know. Naruto eyed his parents before he reluctantly nodded. But he was intent on finding out what they were keeping from him. So what happens now? Naruto asked as his father had a sad look on his face as he looked at Itachi. They have to be stopped, Itachi. I'm sorry to have to do this, but Fugaku has gone too far now. I don't know how he thinks he will get away with it, but I cannot allow him to put the lives of the people of Konoha in jeopardy. Itachi sadly nodded, knowing internally that it was always going to come to this eventually. Though my father and most of the Uchiha police corps are involved, there are many that want no part in it. My mother and my two siblings Sasuke and Ria must be spared. My mother only has not gone to tell you because he threatened to harm Sasuke and Ria if she did. Minato nodded. Of course. Those that are not involved in the coup will be spared and will not be held responsible for the action of those that want to hurt the village. I hoped it never had to come to this. Hiruzen said sadly, since he was just a boy when the Uchiha clan had first settled into Konoha with the Senju clan and the other clans. Minato and Kushina nodded while Kushina's thoughts turned to her longtime friend and wondered what Fugaku had put her through. If that is the fate that falls to the dark part of my family, then I ask you now that you allow me to be the one to draw the curtain on that part of the Uchiha clan. Allow me to end what my father is planning. The adults looked at Itachi in shock and surprise. No, Itachi. I cannot ask you to do that. Not to your own family. It is noble of you, but I will have my best Anbu handle this now. I can't allow you to take on this burden by yourself. Itachi shook his head. I thank you for the consideration, however, this is my family. If someone is to be the one to stop the evil that has corrupted my family, then it must be left to me. Shisui told me before he died to help bring the Uchiha out of the darkness and back into the light again. I will do just that. Minato and Hiruzen looked with difficulty as they both admired the fact that he wanted to be the one to stop it, but could they really let it fall to a 13-year-old to murder part of his family? If I may make a suggestion, Itachi said, if you do not feel easy with me going in alone, then I can think of a fair agreement. You may send with me 2 of your best Anbu to accompany me, but on the condition that I have one person I can fully trust with me. Minato and Hiruzen looked at one enough, having a silent conversation before they looked back and nodded at Itachi. That is agreeable. I know which 2 Anbu to send with you, though please state who you will pick. We need to know that they are skilled enough and can be trusted. Minato and Hiruzen watched as Kushina gave a little gasp when Naruto stepped forward. No, absolutely not, Kushina said, putting her foot down, but Minato obviously was not listening since he looked down at his son in sympathy and pride at wanting to help his friend with this action. Naruto, are you sure about this? I know you are strong for your age and could probably defeat all Chunins and many of the Jonin of this village, but are you positive you want to help with this task? Minato asked, since it made him uncomfortable that his son wanted in on this mission. I'm positive. I won't let Itachi do this by himself. I will help my friend in this task, and I will not let him take the life of some of his family members all on his own. Itachi gave him a nod of thank you. There is no one I trust more in this village than Naruto or my other teammate Anko. They are the only 2 I would fully feel comfortable watching my back. The adults all looked with heavy breaths. While Kushina did not like it one bit and showed it by the frown on her face, she knew Minato had the final say in it. Minato and Hiruzen once again had a silent conversation between one another before Minato turned back to face the 2 boys. Very well. Naruto, you will accompany Itachi as well 2 Anbu to infiltrate the Uchiha clan compound and those that are attempting to join the coup on the village. Be at my office at 5 p.m. where I will give the briefing to the other 2 Anbu as well as get you fitted for Anbu gear. He said as both boys nodded. Minato then left with Hiruzen and a reluctant Kushina, knowing that plans had to make for tonight and protection had to be issued to Makoto and Itachi's siblings as well as Naruto's siblings. Kushina was not going to let a soul get to Mito on this night. When she got her children from Anko, she took Mito's hand and gripped it gently, but firmly as she led her away. Mina and Eiji were picked up by Minato as they waved goodbye to Naruto. As they left, Itachi and Naruto quickly went to Naruto's room as threw up some more silence seals. Anko was curious what the pair were up to, but before she could get an answer they locked the door. Her eyebrow rose at the action, but she dismissed it as one of the weird boy things. Inside the room, Shisui's body was unsealed on the floor of Naruto's room as Naruto had a scalpel and some medic supplies by his foot as well as a jar full of an unknown substance. Taking a deep breath, He gently opened the deceased Shisui's eyelids and with the scalpel began to make incisions around the eye so he could safely remove the two Sharingan. After a couple of minutes of careful precision, Naruto had extracted both Sharingan from Shisui's eyes and put them in the jar. This liquid should conserve them and keep them from them alive, so to speak. Itachi nodded and took the jar before he took a storage scroll and sealed the Sharingan inside before he sealed that scroll on his arm. Where better to keep it safe than on your own body? That night, nightfall had arrived as the moon was high in the sky and many were on their way home for the night or were just starting to enjoy Konoha's nightlife. On the rooftops overlooking the Uchiha clan compound, 4 figures stood as everyone around them did not even notice they were there. All 4 wore masks on their faces that were porcelain white with various markings that represented an animal. This does feel a little weird being like this. Naruto thought, since being an Anbu was not something he actually planned on doing, even if he was just for one tonight. He had picked a black stripped white tiger mask in honor of his summons. Where are the targets currently? Kakashi asked with his dog mask on, looking at Itachi with a crow mask. My father is in the central manor while the rest are spread out through the compound. Half would be found in the east wing of the compound. The rest will likely be scattered, but with Naruto's sensor abilities we can find them quickly. My mother and siblings are at the Namikaze house while the rest of the innocent Uchihas are at a safe-guarded bunker with Sandaime-sama. Naruto was glad of that since Hiruzen felt it was best he watched over the other Uchiha in the chance that Danzo might try to pick one of them off and gain a Sharingan. Good. We don't want any innocent casualties tonight, Naruto said as Itachi nodded, as did Kakashi and the other masked Anbu who was referred to as Tenzo. Lying in Naruto's pouch was a tri-pronged kunai his father had given him to use to summon him in the emergency in case things went wrong. Minato wanted his son to be able to call him if anything that did not go as planned happened. His mother meanwhile had stuck to Mito all day and had even brought Tsunade and Shizune to the house to watch over her in case this masked person striked. He wanted to know what it was about this man that made his parents so angry and worried. Shaking his head of his thoughts, he saw one of the messenger hawks go overhead, which was the signal to move in. Naruto looked at Itachi and nodded before the 4 jumped from the rooftops and went to complete their mission. Kakashi and Tenzo paired together and took the west wing while Naruto and Itachi would pick off the rest. Naruto and Itachi ran along the rooftops and spotted 3 Uchiha walking together. That's Yashira, Anabi, and Tekka, 3 of my father's biggest supporters, he said as Naruto nodded and both began to ready themselves. As the 3 Uchiha walked alongside the road, they activated their Sharingan and looked towards the roof they were standing on. Only there was nothing there when they looked. When they turned back around, Itachi was in front of them and drove a kunai into Tekka's throat and kicked him to the ground as he bled out in silence. Traitor! Yashira roared before the Shisui went through his chest and through his heart. He looked down at the blade before his eye rolled into the back of his head, with the last thing he saw being Naruto's Anbu mask. Anabi grabbed a kunai from his own pouch with his Sharingan flared with anger and swiped at Itachi. However, Itachi easily dodged and drew his Tanto out from its sheath. He swung and took off the head of Anabi. With the 3 Uchiha dead, he nodded to Naruto, who quick unsealed some containment scrolls and sealed the bodies inside. Once it was done, they moved on to their next target. In that house, Naruto said as Naruto and Itachi burst through a wall with a surprised Uchiha about to have dinner. Before he could even react, Naruto had snapped his neck and sealed him in a storage scroll in a matter of seconds. It went on like that for the next 10 minutes as the rebel Uchiha did not even know what had hit them. With the advantage of surprise, Naruto and Itachi, 28 of the rebelled Uchiha, none had managed to put up much of a fight and were dead within seconds. Naruto swung his blade and decapitated the head of one of the Uchiha that tried to strike him with a Tanto blade, while Itachi used his Kajin fire attack to pierce the chest and instantly his target. By the end of it, a blood-covered Naruto and Itachi walked silently down the streets, since they both knew that by now most of the Uchiha traitors had been dealt with. Naruto could sense Kakashi and Tenzo throughout the mission and both were alive, meaning it had gone well for them. After a few minutes of waiting, Kakashi and Tenzo appeared in front of them, both blood-covered as well as Kakashi held a few storage scrolls in his hand. He looked towards Itachi and gave them to him. Tenzo and Kakashi looked at the two before they vanished from the compound as Naruto and Itachi focused on the building in front of them. There was just one left. Fugaku Uchiha. Naruto and Itachi walked towards the main house of the compound and walked inside. Naruto sensed for Fugaku. He is in your parents' bedroom. Nodding, they both walked up the stairs and headed down the hallway. Itachi counted his steps before he stood outside his parents' room. He turned to Naruto. I must do this on my own. Naruto did not need to hear any more before he nodded and leaned against one of the wall as he watched Itachi open the door to the dark room and walk inside. The door quickly closed behind him. As he did, Naruto made a few shadow clones to scout the compound and make sure all the bodies had been picked up, not wanting to leave it to chance. In room, Itachi walked inside calm and collected and looked towards his father who was on his knees and staring through the window and had his attention on the moon. Itachi walked up and stopped just behind his father. So you have made your choice. Your mother has chosen this path as well? He asked. Yes, she has, as well as Sasuke and Ria. Not looking towards Itachi, Fugaku nodded his head and kept his eyes fixed on the moon. It seems I have failed this clan just like my predecessors before me. Perhaps you can finally bring our family's curse to an end. Fugaku then turned to look at Itachi ever so slightly. You are the man of the house now. Look after your mother and siblings. The clan is in your hands now, and beware the masked one. He will try to influence you or anyone else in the Uchiha clan. I may not show it, but I am proud of you, Itachi. Fugaku said as behind Itachi's Anbu mask terror ran down his face as his grip on his tanto shook. Taking a steady breath and calming himself with his grip on the tanto reaffirmed, he drove it forward and impaled his father straight through the heart. Fugaku made a few strangled noises as life left him until eventually his body slumped to the ground, eyes and mouth closed as he went into the afterlife. Itachi sniffled as his breath became slightly uneven as he looked at his father's dead form but steeled himself. He could let out his grief later. The man might have been a traitor, but he was still his father. He quickly sealed the body away and made his way out of the room, not wanting to be in it any longer. As he arrived outside, he looked towards Naruto and nodded, signalizing that it was done. My clones have swept the area. All Uchiha rebels have binned and stored. There are none left. Then it is time to go. Itachi said quietly as Naruto nodded in responses and quickly made their way out of the house and back outside. As the two boys were about to jump to the roofs, Naruto stopped as he felt a signature he did not recognize a little ways off from the compound, hiding in a tree. It felt like they were looking towards them. Naruto took a breath and looked straight over, but saw no one was in the tree. Though he could have sworn he saw the air from one of the branches ripple, almost like something got it away. It's been a long night. I'm sensing things that are not there. He thought before he followed after Itachi. Namikaze house. Makoto sat on one of the couches as her hands rested in her lap with her thoughts wild and full of concern for her eldest child. Sasuke too was asleep, having taken a spare bed that was set up in the twins' room. Kushina had applied so many barriers and protection seals around that room that when they all activated it looked like a Christmas tree. Kushina was sitting beside her friends with Tsunade not far from them with Shizune. Minato was leaning against the wall beside Kushina. Kakashi and Tenzo had already gone, filling in what they could, and that when they left only Fugaku remained and that both Itachi and Naruto were fine. This quickly made all of them in the room feel better, but was still worried for the two boys. I don't like this. They should have been back by now. Kushina spoke as she got up and started pacing. They will be fine. Those two can handle it. Naruto and Itachi are the best of the next generation. They can get this mission done. Tsunade spoke as Makoto nodded in agreement. I know my two students. I know that independently they are very strong, but together I have no doubt they would be near unbeatable. Kushina listened but continued to pace. As she was about to speak again, they all heard the door open and close and footsteps making their way towards them. They looked to the doorway and felt relieved when Naruto and a still masked Itachi walked in. However, all the adults felt sick to their stomach and ashamed of themselves when they saw all the blood that covered their children. Makoto and Kushina wanted to cry while Minato wondered if he did the right thing letting them do this. The mission is complete, Hokage-sama. Itachi spoke. The bodies of all the Uchiha are in storage scrolls that Naruto has sealed on his wrists. Naruto showed the seal to everyone as they all nodded. How many did you take down? Minato asked gently. It was Naruto who answered. About 28, while Kakashi and Tenzo took out around 25, I believe. Minato accepted the answer. There was no one else around. Just the team and the Uchihas. Itachi nodded yes, though Naruto looked a little suspicious but did not voice his opinion. His parents saw this and would ask him about it later. They gave them a brief run-through of what happened along with any added details. Once it was over, they watched Makoto stand up and walk towards Itachi. Itachi, take off that mask. She said gently, but Itachi did not move. In fact, he hardly reacted at all. Makoto had an angry look on her face. Take off that mask and look at me. She said with a bit more force laced in her words. After a few moments of silence, Itachi's hands shakily went up to his mask and took the crow mask off. When he did, Makoto sobbed and felt her heart break as she watched a flow of tears continue to run down Itachi's face. Not wasting a second, Makoto wrapped him in a tight hug as she placed her son's head in the crook of her neck. Itachi never spoke a word but let his arms wrap around his mother and just grieve, not caring that people were watching. Everyone looked in sadness, as did Naruto as he wiped some tears from his eyes and sniffled. As he did, he too felt arms wrap around him. He saw Kushina wrap her arms around him and held him close to her. Naruto relaxed into his mother and gently hugged her back as well as she gently stroked the back of his head and letting exhaustion from the night finally take over. Later that night, after showering and getting something to eat, Naruto headed into the kitchen of the house since there was one last thing he had left to do. He wore some spare, comfy clothes he had brought with him. Makoto had taken Itachi into the spare room and would stay with him for the night, seeing that her eldest child needed her the most right now after what he had to do in taking the life off his father. Tsunade and Shizune had left for the night as they headed back home while his siblings along with Itachi's continued to sleep silent as if nothing had happened. Walking into the kitchen, he saw his parents sitting at the kitchen table, both not saying a word. They looked up at him when he came into the kitchen and took a seat in front of them. You both said you would give me answers. I want those answers now. Minato and Kushina nodded, though both looked sad. They did not think they would have to tell him at such a young age, but their son was not like other children. They saw that now and knew he could take it. It was Minato who spoke and began to tell him. We will tell you the truth about that night on October 10th.